They say high school is supposed to be the best time of your life. But for me, it's always been a race to prove that I deserve to be here. I'm Lena Hart, scholarship student, top of the class, invisible to most people, except when they need homework answers. And then there's him, Ethan Carter, the school's golden boy. Rich, popular, effortlessly charming, and completely allergic to anything that looks like effort. Every time I see him, I can't help but wonder, how can someone so perfect on the outside be such a disaster on the inside? I found out the answer the day I was assigned to tutor him. It was after class, in the principal's office. I knew something was wrong the moment she called me in. "You're our best student," she said, smiling politely. "We'd like you to help Ethan Carter with his grades." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're aware his father is a major supporter of the school," she continued. "He's asked that we make sure Ethan passes his finals." So basically, I was being forced to babysit the school's biggest headache because his dad wrote the biggest check. And as a scholarship student, refusing wasn't really an option. I forced a polite smile. Of course. Inside, I was fuming. The first day of tutoring was exactly what I expected. Ethan strolled into the library 15 minutes late, headphones dangling around his neck, hair a mess, and that infuriating smirk plastered across his face. "Hey, genius girl," he said, leaning back in the chair across from me. "You called?" "You're 15 minutes late," I said, pushing my notebook toward him. He grinned. "You're lucky I showed up at all." I wanted to roll my eyes, but I kept my voice calm. "Let's start with algebra." "I don't speak alien," he said, spinning his pen on his finger. "Figures." I forced him to write, scolding and correcting him, while he teased and grinned. And yet, there was something in his eyes that made me pause. Beneath the arrogance, the teasing, there was a kind of loneliness I didn't expect. Over the next few weeks, our sessions became something else entirely. A rhythm developed. He still teased. I still scolded. But the small moments started catching me off guard. Like the time his pencil rolled off the table and our hands brushed when I picked it up. Or when he laughed genuinely at one of my dry jokes, and it wasn't the fake laugh he used around everyone else. He started showing me sides of himself I hadn't anticipated. Patience, care, little gestures that didn't make sense for someone so cocky. And I hated that I noticed. I hated that it made my heart race. It wasn't all sweetness. Rumors started, whispers in the hallway, notes shoved into lockers, people pairing our names with little hearts. And of course, I cared. My scholarship, my reputation, it was all at stake. One afternoon, after a particularly long tutoring session, I ran into a hallway full of whispers and laughter. I could feel the walls closing in, and then he appeared, wiping the whiteboard clean, glaring at anyone who dared smirk. "Got a problem?" he asked, his voice low. "Say it to my face." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his problem, but it was, and I couldn't lie. I cared about him more than I wanted to admit. And then came the night that changed everything. The library was empty, rain tapping against the windows, the air thick with quiet. He looked different that night, vulnerable. "You know," he said quietly, almost to himself, "my dad doesn't really care if I pass. He just doesn't want his son to embarrass him." I hesitated. "You don't have to prove anything to him?" "You don't get it, Lena," he whispered. "When everyone expects you to be perfect, failing feels louder. Every mistake, it echoes. I studied him, the mask slipping for the first time. You're not as shallow as you pretend to be. He gave me a small, almost sad smile. Don't tell anyone. You'll ruin my reputation. I laughed softly, and for a moment, the world felt quieter. Somehow, safer, but the outside world doesn't care about moments like that. Hallway whispers became louder. The principal summoned me after class, questioning my conduct, implying that the rumors could jeopardize my scholarship. I wanted to scream, to run, to make him see what it felt like to fight for everything, and I did. I ran, out into the rain, cold droplets on my face, stinging like my anger and frustration, and there he was, Ethan, soaked, breathless, searching for me. "Lena," he said, "I'm sorry. You should have stayed away," I snapped. "You don't understand what it's like to have to fight for every single thing." And then he said something I'll never forget. "Then teach me. I don't want to be the guy everyone pities. I want to be someone you don't have to be ashamed of." After that night, everything changed. He started studying, really studying, staying late, practicing problems until they made sense. And I stayed too, helping quietly, keeping my distance, because if I let myself feel, I knew I would fall completely. It was a slow, quiet transformation. He wasn't just working for grades, he was working for me. And somehow, it hurt my chest in a way I couldn't explain. The day of the results, when the principal announced him as the most improved student, I felt a strange mix of pride and warmth. He found me in the crowd and smiled, a small, shy, triumphant smile, and I smiled back. Later, outside, the wind soft, the sun filtering through clouds, he stood before me. "You believed in me even when you didn't want to," he said softly. I shook my head, laughing faintly through tears. "You proved me wrong, in the best way." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the tension between us thick. "What happens now?" he asked. "We graduate. We move on," I whispered. "And us?" I smiled softly, a tear sliding down my cheek. "Some stories don't need perfect endings to be worth remembering." His hand brushed my cheek gently, almost reverently. The world was quiet, holding its breath, and I realized I would never forget him. He taught me that failure isn't the end, and love isn't a distraction. It's the reason we try again. Somewhere between equations and coffee cups, I found something real, something that didn't need to last forever, to mean forever. Maybe someday, our paths will cross again, and when they do, I'll thank him for teaching me more than words ever could. I thought I had left him behind. High school, memories, everything that tied me to that time. It felt like a chapter I had closed for good. College was supposed to be different, a fresh start, a city that no one knew me in, a campus full of strangers, a life I could finally call my own. I was excited to live in a small dorm with my own space, to decorate it with pictures and fairy lights, to have quiet mornings with coffee in hand and books spread out across my desk. I imagined walking across the campus, feeling the grass under my shoes, hearing laughter from friends I hadn't met yet, and the soft hum of people living their own lives, unaware of mine. I had worked so hard to get here. Every late night, every skipped party, every paper I wrote, every exam I aced, it had led me to this. I was proud. I felt ready. College was everything I had imagined, bright, alive, full of energy, full of promise. The first week was a whirlwind. I found my rhythm quickly, discovering quiet corners of the library where I could study without interruptions. Cafes with sunlight spilling through the windows became my morning retreat. I met people who shared my love for books, who argued with me about philosophy and politics, who laughed at my dry jokes. I was thriving. For the first time in years, I felt completely untethered from the past. And then, I saw him. I froze. Ethan. It was the strangest combination of familiarity and shock. He looked different, older, sharper somehow, more composed than the messy, teasing boy I remembered from high school. Yet the same impossible presence lingered, that air of confidence, that effortless charm, and those piercing eyes that made me feel like he could see through me, right to the parts I wanted no one to notice. I wanted to look away. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, a familiar face among thousands of students. That was all. That's all it could be. But then he started appearing everywhere. The library, where I spent hours reading and taking notes. The campus cafe, where I loved to sit in the sunlight with my coffee. Even the hallways outside my dorm. He was always there, sometimes just across the room, sometimes closer than I expected. Always watching, always knowing, always there. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing. College was supposed to be mine, my safe space. But my body betrayed me. My heart would skip. My chest would tighten. My mind would spin with all the what-ifs I told myself not to think. And worse, a small, almost forbidden part of me felt excited. Because despite everything, despite the fear, I had missed him. Ethan Carter. I had spent years trying to forget him, and now he was here, not by accident, not by chance. He was here because of me. And suddenly, the college that had felt like freedom felt smaller, confined, tighter. Every corner of it seemed to be laced with his presence, with the memory of him. Every smile I shared with a new friend, every conversation in a sunlit cafe, every quiet moment in my dorm, he was there in my mind. I hated it, and yet I couldn't look away. The days that followed were filled with subtle, unnerving coincidences. A lecture where I noticed him sitting just a few rows behind me, eyes scanning the room until they found me. A group project where, somehow, he ended up in my class. Even small, seemingly random things. Finding my favorite book left open on a table with a single page marked, a cup of coffee, waiting in the cafe before I arrived. Everything pointed to one thing. He had orchestrated this. And I hated that I found myself wanting it. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted him to care. I wanted to know that it wasn't all in my head, that somehow he had come back for me. But I was also terrified. Terrified of what this meant. Terrified of what he had become. Because he had changed. I could see it in the sharpness of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, the way he moved with quiet purpose instead of the careless charm I remembered. He wasn't the playful boy who had made me laugh and roll my eyes all those years ago. He was different, and yet the same. I remember the first time he actually spoke to me on campus. It was in the library, quiet, late afternoon, the sunlight filtering through the tall windows. I had my nose buried in a book, fingers tracing the pages, when I felt a presence beside me. "You're hard to miss," he said softly. I froze, my heart jumping. "Excuse me?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, though it sounded breathless even to me. I said. He leaned slightly closer, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "You're impossible to ignore." It was the same line I might have laughed off in high school. But now, It felt like a warning, a challenge, something dark, something thrilling, and entirely dangerous. I wanted to get up. I wanted to run. And at the same time, I wanted to stay.